Hello everyone. Uh, I'm ready with my next lecture of literature, basically of prose. The first chapter, My Struggle for an Education, and you are in class 11th. It means you are to learn how to explain a passage in prose and how to write reference and context. Because this prose is considered for detailed study, and therefore you need to learn everything from very concentrated point of view, otherwise you will miss the gist of it. Let's see, I shall start from the very title. The title denotes My Struggle for an Education. My Struggle for an Education actually talks about the personal struggle of author. When someone talks about his personal struggle, then it is named as self struggle, and when his struggle, his life struggle, is in the written format, then it is named as biography. Bio stands for life, and graphy stands written. So this is, if someone's life story, I'm adding here life story. If someone's life story is in the written format, then it is called a biography. But if the life story is written by the author himself or herself, then it becomes autobiography. Autobiography. So over here, the author is talking about the struggle of his own life, and he himself had written it, and therefore this essay, My Struggle for an Education, that is written by Booker T. Washington, is an autobiography. You need to keep this word always in your mind when you are studying this chapter. Autobiography. This is. And let's talk a bit about Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington was an American, and he was a Negro. Negro means a person of black skin. He was not a white skinned person. He was a black skinned person. He was a Negro, and therefore he faced the problem of discrimination, class discrimination, caste discrimination, as we have in India. The same discrimination of skin he faced in USA. Actually, this chapter denotes his denotes his facing of difficulties, his struggle. He started his struggle at the age of 9. Actually, he had started working in different mines, in different places of work, to earn his livelihood, to support his parents. But anyhow, he managed all these things, and one day he was inspired to make himself educated. And this very inspiration, the determination that he had in his mind at the time, made him successful, and finally we are studying his essay autobiography, that is My Struggle for an Education. Of course, this chapter is going to give us a lot. It has a very inspiring message. This essay inspires us to stand against every problem of life, to face every challenges of life, to go up to every hardships of life in order to achieve success. Let's see, I explained you the title and the author just because it is very important when you are going to write the explanation part. If you are unaware of if you are unintroduced with the title and the author, then of course you will not be able to write the reference and context. So the part that helps you to write the reference and context I have explained you, and now explanation part starts from here. Well, my dear students, I shall start the text now and I shall explain it. I shall help you how to explain the passages in your board exam, in your home exam too. So, one day while at work in the coal mine, I happened to overhear two miners talking about a great school for colored people somewhere in Virginia. Well, for explanation purpose, when we are studying the passage, actually we have to concentrate over the sentence framing, keeping the story in our mind, keeping the message of the passage, message of the line in our mind. We need to frame our own simple and short sentences for explanation purpose. Let's see. One day, while at work in the coal mine, you can simply say, one day the author was working in a coal mine. I happened to overhear two miners. Suddenly, he heard two coal miners. Miners means those who work in the mines, those who work as a laborer in coal mines, in different type of mines. Basically, over here he is talking about the coal mine. So one day, suddenly he heard, overheard means he heard, hearing someone silently. Suppose I am talking to someone and someone is listening my talk without my information. I don't know whether he is listening or not, but he is listening. So this is so over here. Over means listening someone by in a silent way, silently. So this is, he was also listening by chance to the two coal miners, and they were talking about a great school for colored people. So once again, look, I have framed two sentences and now I shall frame third sentence from here. Those two coal miners were talking about a great school, a very famous school, and this school was reserved for colored people. Colored people means those who are black people, those who are Negroes. And it was situated, it was placed somewhere in Virginia. Virginia is a state like our UP in India. In the same way, Virginia is a state in USA. This was the first time that I had ever heard anything about a kind of a school or college that was more pretentious than the little colored school in our town. And author shares his ideas with us. He says that this was the first time, for the first time in his life, he had heard about such a school. And he says anything about any kind of a school or college. Says uh, till now I had never heard of a school. I never knew what a school is and what happens over there. About the very process of schooling, he was completely unaware of. But when he heard for the first time in his life these two coal miners talking about that great school, it was more pretentious than the little colored school in our town. He says, yes, we have a very small school for the Negroes, for the colored people, for the black people in my own town, but it never attracted me actually. It never attracted me as much as this school that two coal miners were talking about. So this was the very first passage that I explained you. Move to the next. As they went on describing the school, it seemed to me that it must be the greatest place on earth. So they were describing the school in a very bombastic manner, in a very hyperbolic way. And it seemed to me that it must be the greatest place on earth. With their explanation, with their description, Booker T. Washington came to know that this place is the greatest place on earth. Not even heaven presented more attractions for me at the time than did the Hampton Normal and Agriculture Institute in Virginia, about which these men were talking. He says at that time, if someone had presented a choice for me, Mr. Booker T. Washington, will you go to heaven or you go to Hampton Normal Agriculture Institute? Then he says, I would have chosen to go to Hampton Normal Agriculture Institute than to heaven. So he says, even heaven did not attract me at the time as much as this school had attracted me. He says the name, yes, of course, the name of this institute was Hampton Normal and Agricultural Institute, and as I told you, it was in Virginia, a state in USA, and about which these men were talking. Yes, of course, these men. Who were these men? These men were the miners, the two coal miners who were working with him. So they were talking about that school, Hampton Normal and Agriculture Institute. I resolved means decided, just I determined at once, means at the very moment, at the very time, to go to that school. Yes, now I had only one idea, that I shall go to school. Although I had no idea where it was, he says, only there was one determination, only there was one, uh, you can simply say, oath in my own mind, that I shall go to that college, I shall go to that school, but I didn't know where that school was. Otherwise, uh, how many miles away? He says, I didn't try to know how many miles away is it, but or how I was going to reach it. He also didn't think of reaching there. How will he reach there? But he had just determined, yes, I shall go there anyhow, anyway. I was on fire constantly with one ambition, and that was to go to Hampton. He says, at that time, I had only one wish in my mind, in my heart, and that was to go to Hampton, to reach to Hampton anyhow. This thought was with me day and night. He says, this idea never left my mind. It was always all the 24 hours in my mind. It hovered in my mind all the 24 hours. See the next passage. In the fall of 1872, I determined to make an effort to get there. He says, in the fall of 1872, says, in the spring of 1872, I decided to make an effort to go there. He says, so finally, in the spring season of 1872, I decided to go there. My mother was troubled with great fear. Yes, of course, my mother was in trouble. Actually, every mother is in trouble when a child decides to go to a place that is completely unintroduced. Even the distance is not clear. Even the very place, how miles away is it, is not clear. So the mother, of course, will be in trouble. She will never allow to go there. So the same was the condition with the author. I mean, his mother was in great difficulty, that I was starting out on a wild goose chase. So his mother believed that the author was starting his journey for nothing. Wild goose chase means nobody can chase a wild goose, because the goose lives in those wild areas and you don't live, therefore you can't chase that. So you can't chase means the author had started an unchaseable wild goose, means he had started a journey for nothing, that his mother believed. At any rate, I got only a half-hearted consent from her that I might start. But because a mother is always a mother, and author asked her many times, and therefore the mother had finally consented with him, and allowed him to go with a half heart. I had very little money. He says, I had very little money with which to buy clothes and pay my traveling expenses. He says, मेरे पास बहुत थोड़ा सा पैसा था जिससे मुझे अपने ट्रैवलिंग एक्सपेंसेस के लिए कुछ ट्रैवलिंग एक्सपेंसेस को कंप्लीट करना था और कुछ क्लोथ्स खरीदना था. So what he says, I had very little money with which to buy clothes and pay my traveling expenses. I don't have enough money, and therefore I had to do a lot of things like buying clothes and paying my traveling expenses. So my brother John helped me. He says I had one brother. His name was John, and he helped me but all that he could. But of course that was not a great deal. Yeah, of course he tried to help me, but his help was not enough. It was not a great deal. I mean, it was not a great help. It was just a bit of help. Finally the great day came. The great day means the day that he had to start his journey. So says I started for Hampton, and says finally I started my journey. I had only a small cheap satchel. He says, I had only a small cheap satchel that contained the few articles of clothing. He says, finally the great day came and I started for Hampton. I had only a small cheap satchel that contained the few articles of clothing I could get. He said, now I took a small cheap means very not very costly. So says a very light satchel. Satchel means a leather bag, and it contained a few articles of clothing as it has some of my clothes that I could get with me. My mother at the time was rather weak and broken in health. At the time when I was departing, my mother was feeling weak. She was ill. She was broken in health. I hardly expected to see her again, and thus the parting was all the more sad. And he says she was as ill as I could not expect her to see again. But still, I decided to go. Thus, our parting was all the more sad. And therefore, when I was leaving my mother in that very ill condition, my departure, my parting with my mother was not good, was not happy. She, however, was very brave through it all. But my mother, if she had stopped at the time, I could not have gone there. But she was quite courageous, quite brave. She didn't stop me. She allowed me to go there. The distance from Malden to Hampton is about 500 miles. He says, yes, of course, Malden is the name of my own village. And from Malden, my village, to Hampton, the Hampton Normal Agricultural Institute, is about 500 miles away by walking. He says, I started my journey by walking, begging rights, and then yes, I was asking people for lift, both in wagons and in cars. In some way, after a number of days, I reached the city of Richmond, Virginia. Says after some days walking and begging rides in cars and in wagons and everything. Wagons means you can say horse van, simply you can say horse van. So finally after number of days the author reached the city of Richmond. There was city like in our Uttar Pradesh we are living in Prayagraj, so Prayagraj is a city. In the same way in USA there is Virginia, and in Virginia there was a city Richmond. So he reached the city of Richmond about 82 miles from Hampton. Still Hampton was almost 82 miles away. When I reached there, he says, author says, when I reached the city of Richmond, I was very tired, extremely tired, hungry, very hungry, and dirty. Of course, he had become very dirty. His clothes have become very dirty. It was late in the night, and says, I reached very late in the night. So it was not easy for me to reach there. I had never been in a large city, and this rather added to my misery. He says this was for the first time in my life that I ever visited to a city, and to such a large city like Richmond. So this also added to my misery. This also made my troubles more crucial. When I reached Richmond, he says, when I reached Richmond, I was completely out of money. I had no money left with me. I had not a single acquaintance in the place. He says, I I never knew any person over there, and nobody knew me at that place. And being unused to city ways, and because I was not aware of the city we have here, how do people we have in the cities, I didn't know where to go, and therefore I was unable to think what to do and where to go. I asked at several places for lodging. Sometimes I was just requesting people to let me stay for some times, but they all wanted money. But all of them had only one wish, desire to earn money, and therefore they demanded money from me, and that was what I did not have. And this was the problem, that I didn't have any money. Knowing nothing else better to do, I walked the streets. When I couldn't think better what to do, he says, just I walked and walked and walked the streets of Richmond. He says, I must have walked the streets till after midnight. He says it was almost the midnight. I was just walking and walking and walking. At last, I became so exhausted. He says, till it was midnight, I became extremely tired, and I could walk no longer, and my feet were not moving ahead. I was extremely tired, and I was unable to move even one step. I was tired, I was hungry, I was everything but discouraged. He says, but I was not discouraged. Just about the time when I reached extreme physical exhaustion, he says, just at the time when I felt that I am completely tired and I cannot move even one step, I came upon a portion of a street where the broad sidewalk was considerably elevated. Suddenly, I reached such a place where there was a sidewalk for the people to go on foot, and there was an elevated footpath over there. It was elevated. Like this is the sidewalk and this is the elevated path. So he found this place a very safe place for him, and therefore I waited for a few minutes. He and the author waited there for some time till I was sure that no passers-by could see him, and he found that no passers-by, no foot passenger can see him over there, and then crept under the sidewalk, and just he entered into the sidewalk and lay for the night on the ground, and he just lied down on the ground with my satchel of clothing for pillow. He took his clothing as a pillow. He took his satchel that he had kept clothes in it as a pillow, and he just tried to sleep it. Nearly all night I could hear the tramp of feet over my head. He says almost all the night I could hear the very steps of people going here and there from this side to that side. This happened for all the night. The next morning, I found myself somewhat refreshed. When I woke up in the next morning, because I had taken a very sound sleep and therefore I was refreshed, but I was extremely hungry. He says, I had a very great hunger that I felt inside me. As soon as there was light enough for me to see my surroundings, I noticed that I was near a large. He says, very soon I found out that there is light enough. The morning is quite clear, and now I can see my surroundings very clearly. So I saw that I was near a very large ship. Says there was a very large ship over there. It seemed to be unloading a cargo of pig iron, as it seemed to me that it has a cargo of pig iron. Pig iron means raw material. There was a raw material of iron, and it was unloading from that very ship. I went at once to the vessel. Just I went to the ship and asked the captain to permit me to help unload the vessel in order to get money for food. The author requested to the captain of the ship that he was very hungry and he needed some money, and therefore he want to work over here. He want to unload the vessel, so please allow me so that I could get some food. The captain, a white man who seemed to be kind hearted. The captain was, of course, he was not a negro, he was a white man, and but he was a kind person and he consented. He just accepted his request. I working long enough to earn money for my breakfast, and it seems to me, as I remember it now, to have been about the best breakfast that I have ever eaten. So says, I worked for a long time to earn money for breakfast. Says, for my breakfast I worked very harder and then I earned some money. And it seems to me, and today when I think of it, I found it, as I remember, to have been about the best breakfast that I have ever eaten. It says that was the best breakfast of my life that I had ever eaten. So, my dear children, this was the first part of this chapter that I had tried to explain you, and the rest of passages will be explained you later. But I think you should be given some homework to attempt so that you could write that in your fair copy, and you could be also benefited with it. So let's see, we are on the comprehension passages. Here are comprehension passages. This B part. In the fall of to brave through it all. There are four questions of it. When did the writer formally decide to go to that institution? एक है. And then what was the author's mother afraid of? And then how much money did the writer have? How much did John help him? What did the author possess when he started towards Hampton? So I think this very passage should be attempted as a homework. And I hope you will attempt it with all your effort, and of course your effort to complete this homework will benefit you enough, and you will get an idea to answer the questions properly, and I am just helping you how to explain a passage with your own simple and short sentences. And now, thanks for today. Thank you so much.